Hey, what's going on? Just gonna make a video talking about some of the possible next index inclusions for BitMine. Tom Lee recently made a video talking about why BitMine declared a dividend because the dividend is actually quite small. So yeah, they basically announced that they will start off with a dividend of 1 cent per share. Which is kind of low and feels a bit pointless, but he explains in this following bid, there is a point to it. Paying a dividend allows BitMine to get listed on um, more indexes and get included in more funds, which ultimately leads to more volume and more trading, which is good for a digital asset company.
If we look at the world of large cap crypto stocks, we are the only company that's over $9 billion of market cap, or even $5 billion, that's paying a dividend. In the future institutional world, um, paying a dividend is not only a sign of stability. NVIDIA pays a dividend. In fact, roughly half of the Mag 7 AI stocks pay a dividend. But it does allow you to also be owned by core funds and income-oriented funds as well.
Love it. And the other differentiation I would suggest is just your
So, thought I'd have a look at a few of the big core funds with potential for listing and just go through some of the criteria that the funds look at. So for the first one, S&P 500, it's the one everybody knows. In order to get into the S&P 500, you have to be a US listed stock. So BitMine meets that criteria. You must be in the large cap size range. So BitMine is basically borderline large cap. So it's pretty volatile stock. So if we had a look at Yahoo Finance, which maybe like not the most accurate, but it's good enough. It's telling us that it's about $15 billion in market cap, which is if we go to the S&P 500 companies by weight and go all the way down to the bottom and look at the bottom one, this one here, News Corp. See this one here, that's actually around 15 billion as well. So I think that would be just enough to get in into the large cap size range. The next criteria is it would have to be profitable under GAAP reporting for 4 quarters in a row. So BitMine only just put out their first earnings last month sometime. So under that criteria, it wouldn't be eligible yet to get into the S&P 500. But potentially the earliest inclusion for S&P 500 could be 2026, as long as every quarter is profitable. That might be a bit optimistic. So maybe a more realistic prediction would be 2027 or 2028. Another core fund is the S&P Composite 1500 Index. So to get into this one, basically you just need to be included in the S&P 500, S&P 400, or S&P 600. Yeah, BitMine will get into this one once it can get into one of the first two. But I don't think BitMine will get included in the S&P 500 or 400 for another year or two. But I think one of the ones that it can get into, and it will get into, is the Russell 2000 Index. And I think even Tom Lee's spoken about this. So it's based on market cap. BitMine does meet the market cap requirements for this. And next May or June, they will do a rebalancing. So there is no dividend requirement for this, no profitability requirement. BitMine is US listed, so it meets that requirement. And it is definitely a very liquid stock. It's one of the most liquid stocks in all of America. So I would say it's almost certain that it will get into the Russell 2000 around halfway through next year. Now, in terms of other dividend funds, one of the top ones is the S&P High Yield Dividend Aristocrats. So one of the criteria is that it needs to be in the S&P Composite 1500 first. So like I mentioned, that one's probably coming a little bit later on, maybe 2027, 2028 kind of thing, after Bitmain can show that it's consistently profitable. But the other big requirement for this one is that you must have 20 years of consecutive dividend increases. So Bitmain is just getting started. They're here for the long run. If they can consistently increase their dividend year after year, then they can make their way into this fund. Aside from that, Bitmain can get included in private managed funds, any other dividends focused funds that not these core funds as well. Tom's spoken about like income funds specifically. They don't have to be these big ones. Like the S&P High Yield Dividend Aristocrats Fund. It's pretty much the gold standard. That one there is basically like a value dividend fund, but Bitmain is essentially still like in its growth phase, so that one can come later. But the reason for declaring the dividend is, to eventually get to that point, to kind of future-proof the stock. So yeah, to recap, basically next year we have a pretty solid chance of getting into some of these small cap index funds such as the Russell 2000, and then in the midterm, I think that we have a high chance of getting into the S&P 500 if we can get the high liquidity and the market cap high. And then in the very long term, I think if Bitmain can keep the dividends increasing year after year, then we can get into like the legendary income funds such as the S&P High Yield Dividend Aristocrats Fund.